Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our this morning's virtual breakfast briefing. Thank you for joining us today and taking time out of your busy schedules. Today, we're talking about the value of ESG reporting and disclosure horizon scanning and how you can turn reporting risk into impact. We like to give everyone a couple of minutes to get logged in and settled in. So please get comfortable, grab your favorite morning beverage. And while everyone's getting settled in, kind of encourage you, if you like to, introduce yourself in the chat. You can find in WorkCast on the right-hand tab by toggling the icons there, the chat functionality. And please share where you're calling in from today, who you are, organization, maybe can share what the weather's like today. Myself, I'm Andy. I'm from the Seismic team. I'm our Chief Community Officer, and I'm calling you from our Luxembourg office this morning, where it has been wet and rainy for most of the spring, but it looks like today, this morning is dry, and I think the sun is trying to poke through, which will be very welcome for everyone, I believe. Hopefully you've got the sun shining where you're at, or it's headed your way. We are going to be recording this morning's session, and we will be sharing a recap afterwards with everyone who has registered. Good morning, Lee from London town. Glad it's warm, and hopefully that gray goes away for you. Thank you for joining us. Great, so I think we can kick things off. I'm just gonna introduce what we want to cover during our time here today. As part of our agenda, I'm gonna turn it over in just a minute to my colleague, Ro, who's gonna share with you our experience, what we are seeing from businesses and hearing from businesses like yours around the value of ESG reporting, horizon scanning, and how other organizations are turning regulatory reporting risk into impact and ESG performance, and some concrete examples on how to get started with a horizon scan. We've then got two wonderful guest speakers who are corporate sustainability practitioners themselves, who we're going to have a panel session with. And then we're going to leave time at the end to open it up to questions, your questions and discussions along the way. As we are going through the session this morning, again, in that chat function, thank you all for introducing yourselves. Do please feel free to throw questions, comments, things you'd like to share along the way, and we'll use that to kind of have a curated list once we get to the Q&A session. So just briefly introducing, for those of you who are not familiar with who we are at Seismic, we are partners to our businesses, our clients on sustainability, helping them drive lasting, positive social and environmental performance across their business. And our team has a variety of subject matter experts across reporting and disclosure, communications, net zero, B Corp, and a number of areas in between. And we help businesses lead the shift to business as a force for good. We've had, as you can see on our client slide here, the privilege of supporting just under 200 businesses now from a variety of sectors and sizes and geographies, from B2B to B2C to tech and investment firms. And one of the great pleasures I get to have when I'm wearing my Chief Community Officer hat is to bring together our clients and our partners in our community so that they can share experiences and learnings to help others on their sustainability journey, which I'm very pleased to be able to do with you all today. And of those 200 or so businesses, we've helped them in a number of areas, helping them accelerate sustainability and ESG progress in order to achieve their business objectives, whether that's strategy to B Corp or carbon to comms or reporting and disclosure. That's some of the ways that we've helped all of those organizations on the previous slide. But that's enough about us. We actually want to hear, before we dig in, a little bit more about how you're keeping up with reporting and disclosure requirements for your business. So I think we're going to put a poll up on the screen. If you could, if this idea of a more proactive, structured way to understanding ESG reporting and disclosure requirements is quite new to you, could you choose a 1? Or if you are in the midst of trying to get started with a more proactive and structured approach to that, then choose a 2. Or if you've already started implementing that and you and your business are benefiting from increased clarity and confidence around the requirements of your business, then do please choose a 3. And while you are responding to the poll, I'm going to take a moment to just introduce our wonderful colleague, Ro, who is the head of impact development here at Seismic, and she heads up our reporting and disclosure services. And Ro and the team keep on top of the changing demands on businesses from government and other stakeholders, and they translate those demands into impact and commercial opportunities. Ro brings to our client her firsthand experience in managing ESG data, reporting from over 20 years of experience working in-house in ESG and commercial roles. And she's got a real passion for reporting and disclosure. She loves helping her clients identify untapped commercial opportunities and avoiding greenwashing. Ro, thank you for being with us this morning and sharing your experience. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Andy. Wow, that's a very kind introduction, and it's just so wonderful to be with you all here today. I cannot deny it. It is true. I am a self-declared reporting geek. I do really love the way that frameworks and guidance, they enable impact when properly understood, when they're specifically applied to the business, and they're simplified for business in language that we can really use every day. When I worked in a very large global organization, I found that reporting standards gave structure. They supported the enablement and the empowerment of decision making, but I also find it really effective as guardrails for high growth scale up businesses to de-risk activity and to focus on priorities. And this is the conversation that I love having with our clients and our businesses on really how to support that and how to enable it. I think everybody is very clear that globally, voluntary frameworks and mandated reporting regulations and standards have just been increasing and increasing. In fact, they have doubled over the last 5 years, with over 600 ESG reporting provisions in place, and they keep increasing. As well as we have experienced that pace, we also have seen environmental and social legislation has been rapidly increasing, especially out of the EU and also in the UK. Last week, when I was out on holiday, just to kind of explain that pace, there was at least, I think, 2 different EU disclosures and updates that came out. In the UK themselves, there was the Financial Conduct Authority update of the anti-greenwashing rules. And then we also saw CSRD adopted into national legislation. It just keeps happening so fast, and not one person is really capable of being able to keep pace with that and understand all the implications. So that's why we have clients that come to us, and it's why you're here today, to really understand, how do you keep on top of this constant change and the detail of all the different legislation? How do you turn new legislation and risks into opportunity and improved and environmental social impact? And thank you so much for filling in the poll just now in terms of understanding, what do you know about horizon scanning? Where are you at with your process? And how does it support you to really clarify and demystify the challenges that we see? And I think when I look at the results as well, I can see that it's quite a large percentage, over 30% of the group, that didn't really know it was a thing. And that's okay. We're going to illuminate to you today and share more information and insights about what horizon scanning is. Also, some people have really started to get on board and try to get started with it, which is a really fantastic step to be, a really positive progress. And there's a couple of you out there that would like more clarity and more confidence. And we really hope today, as we go through the rest of the session, that we'll give that to you. So what is horizon scanning? And before we move on to the slides and cover more of the detail, I just want to give you a very clear sentence and statement. Horizon scanning is an effective strategic activity and tool for sustainability leaders to keep ahead of the curve and clarify the case for action within your business to do this. We will share our experience and expertise today, and we will go through how we demystify what horizon scanning is, the value it will bring you as a leader and to your business, how to get started, and when to conduct. And then afterwards, I'm going to hand back to Andy and our esteemed panel of business leaders who will talk you through more of their understandings, their learnings, their challenges, and their opportunities when they've been facing mandatory sustainability reporting. So what is horizon scanning when we break it into a little more detail? Let's start at the foundations. In its simplest terms, horizon scanning is that strategic activity and tool, and it provides you with an informed view of the legal requirements, the risks, the opportunities that are facing your business, both in the current and the future ESG regulations that may impact your company over time. The activity itself is also a great opportunity for stakeholder engagement. Collect insights collected through interviews and conversations with key stakeholders to gain an understanding of current practices. With that, it provides really useful and purposeful insights and recommendations. And Horizon Scan will provide a consolidated insights and recommendations on what legislation is critical to you as a business. Key takeaways to inform your decision making on those risks, on those opportunities, and hopefully the impact it will bring, and resourcing with recommendations for prioritized next steps. So talking about the benefits that it brings, those insights and recommendations to make useful and purposeful actions. The first benefit that horizon scanning can bring relates to effective resource planning. Let me tell you about a story that I have from my time as an ESG and commercial leader working in supply chain when I was in a large organization. Everybody knew that Brexit was coming. It was a very strong, clear recognition of a big legal change and governance change that was happening to an organization. People were talking about it. There was a lot of activity that was going on. However, getting into the actual detail of the risks and the compliance and the commercial opportunities, we never really assigned a proper person, a dedicated resource, to be able to support with a very significant piece of legislative change as part of the Brexit. I won't bore you with the details. It was around country of origin, and those in supply chain will know it. But that was a real problem for us. And I think with a good horizon scanning and embedding it into the business, we wouldn't have been in that place where we were scrambling to find the right person with the right level of experience to be able to sort the right kind of activities to make sure that we weren't caught off guard and not prepared for some of the potential costs, the potential risks, legal risk of not completing that correctly, and also just the feeling of uncalm and unsense that we had within the business. Other benefits include sustainability claims. With regulations and backlash against greenwashing increasing, businesses are under pressure to get their sustainability disclosures and communications right, and it's only going to increase. Understanding the legislation impact of this is really important. And from a regulatory perspective, we're also seeing increasing demands on businesses to comply. Future proofing. This term gets used a lot, right? But it's so critical to get ahead of the curve and prepare the business for incoming regulation. This reduces the time and effort, which I just mentioned in the first example when preparing for Brexit, but also allows that sense of calm, which is so important to an organisation and ensures ability to focus on areas of resilience and security for the business moving forward. One of our clients really gets this. It's really understanding how to get early, proactive understanding and readiness. And so, based in the UK, they have considered the implications of the International Sustainability Standards Board, the International Financial Risk Standards, so the ISSB, IFRS, and they've brought calm ahead of what was really kind of what's going to happen in the UK this year. Is there going to be sustainability disclosure standards? Is it going to happen in the second half of the year? And then last month we heard actually there's going to be a delay. In January, the UK is most likely going to be adopting the ISSB IFRS, and it will be coming into effect in the second quarter of 2025. That really supports internal decision making, and that particular client has then also been able to reach out to stakeholders and get the committed resource to actually recruit a sustainability reporting manager. And that can really ease the sense of calm with all of these different reporting standards that are out there. And finally, who doesn't like to be confident and feel that they know what they're doing? I think having that external view from subject matter experts on what is current and what future regulatory requirements are happening really helps you ensure that nothing is slipping through the cracks, that you have that go-to understanding document even that you can use as a resource and one source of truth to support you with decision makings. And that's also helped our clients really focus ahead of acquisitions, for example. So they know that they're well prepared for their current portfolio of activities, but they're also considering what are the challenges, what are the opportunities in the regulatory space for a new market that they're entering. And depending on your business strategy, it can also support you for other strategic changes, preparations for mergers, for example, or potentially for sales in terms of making sure that you've got the readiness required and that you're prioritizing the right focuses. And also for many businesses, access to finance. So in terms of green loans and opportunities to access, what we're only seeing is increasing in the UK specifically, more financial backing for climate transition. It can support the opportunity to access that. And we all know the benefits around employee attraction and retention. If you're ahead of the game and you've not been misreporting or not meeting reporting requirements, you're seen as a good employer. So the benefits are clear, and I think most people can consider, yeah, that makes sense to me. I would be very happy to do horizon scanning. But when do I do it? What is a good time to do horizon scanning? Is this a one-off activity, or is this something that is more regular? And what do we say to answer that question? So we basically say that horizon scanning needs to fit your business. The most important thing is that it is completed on a regular basis. And when we look at that, we consider a routine. And that cadence is really specific on your business, depending on your ESG maturity, depending on the number of regulations, depending on your potential number of countries that you operate. But most of our clients, the way they look at it is they do an annual deep dive into all of the key regulations and requirements that are coming out in the ESG landscape. And then they choose to do a refresh. Some clients, that's monthly. Other clients, they look at that on a quarterly basis or potentially even a biannual. But there's other opportunities as well that you can look at in terms of when is it useful and when does it support strategic activity before entering new markets. So pretty clear in terms of getting a full scope and understanding of the different potential legal impacts of ESG in that particular market. Before launching new products, there's a lot of regulation around products that need to be considered when you are looking at commercial advantage. And then also after significant events. So we talked about that before, preparing, but what about after the event as well? We find a lot of opportunity in that space to be able to simplify, speed up, and move things forward in terms of progress. And then individually, thinking about your own position, you may find that coming into a new position within a new company, potentially, a horizon scan is a very holistic and quick activity to get a good understanding of both those ESG regulatory landscape challenges, but also stakeholder needs and opportunities before maybe jumping into a materiality assessment, which is a lot more engagement with your stakeholders. Also, if you are new to sustainability, so you're looking for that understanding, that confidence, and that learning to become an expert in training, I think, as one of our clients said, this is a really good place to start. And also, when you're standing up new governance around ESG, having a framework, a legal framework around the risks and opportunities that you have helps provide that structure to your new ESG governance. And as always, it's a great place to kick off a sustainability strategy. It really enables you to think about some of those pestle factors that contribute to your broader opportunities that are out there. So now we've covered the elements around what is a horizon scan, what are the benefits, how often should I be doing this, how does this make sense to the business? I think it's good to pause and consider a little bit more about, you know, how do you make this really effective in your business? I've seen documents, I've been on plenty of controls audits and health and safety audits and ESG committees, etc., where the document itself is not living and breathing. And therefore, that sometimes means that the opportunities, the insights that have been documented in your horizon scan have not been allowed to really become purposeful. And we know that for many people in a business, when we talk about legal and we talk about legislation and we talk about upcoming laws, the first thing that people consider is risk. and they think about compliance risk. What if I don't comply with this particular law? What will the implications be, and what will be the challenges? And therefore, we do recommend for our businesses that we work with that they consider how to embed the horizon scanning into their risk governance processes. And typically, that supports an existing risk governance process if it's in place within a well-established and mature organization, and also that it is established within the ESG governance of the organization. And sometimes these are separate, sometimes these are combined. It really depends on the organization. But what's so important, don't be like me and the organization that I was with, Brexit. Know what the insights are and know how to make them purposeful. What we want is for businesses to be prepared, to be managing the risks, and identify the opportunities for impact. So over the next couple of slides, we're going to tackle, what do you do with the outputs of the horizon scan? What do you do with that identified compliance risk, commercial risk, and the opportunities, and then the benefits of embedding this ESG risk management into your business. And don't forget, please put some questions in as we go through, as if anything arises as part of the discussion we'll cover later. So we're talking about embedding your horizon scan into your risk management process. When we complete a horizon scan with the businesses and brands that we work with, we recognize that that key way is to first kind of focus on the risk, mitigate the risk, prepare for the risk, and then learn how to turn it into a commercial advantage. And so we do prioritize identifying those that have a high compliance risk. We also consider those with a high commercial risk. And then we consider, what are the options that you have to really take the opportunity to turn that into impact. You might be familiar, or you might have something similar in your business in terms of risk management. You may be familiar with the 5Ts concept. There are opportunities that you can take when you identify the challenges or the risks that you have in place to mitigate them through either transferring to a third party or transferring internally to a different part of the organization. An example, I had this with when I was in supply chain, when the 30% Post-Consumer Resin Act came in to reduce the amount of virgin plastic within certain consumable plastic bottles. We knew that this was going to be a very major impact across the whole of the EU region. We knew that certain markets were going at certain times, which meant there was a bit of a challenge in terms of how to implement that the most effective way commercially, as well as mitigate the risk in terms of the compliance perspective. And so we took the option to balance kind of the cost benefits in terms of the compliance, and also in terms of how to build stakeholder engagement for a much longer term value creation opportunity. And we chose to transfer the risk to a third party who would procure the types of bottles that we required that had a 30% post-consumer resin in the plastic, rather than procure the plastic ourselves, produce, etc. But it allowed the organization to mentally put that over there in the box, make sure we were complying with that for one market. And this side of the organization was really able to consider what are the circular economy effects and impacts of our organization that could actually be commercially advantageous to us. And that was the best use of our resource to enable something really quite special that was a value creation opportunity. Of course, there are always options in terms of just accepting the risks. We can treat the risk, so in terms of mitigating it by becoming more prepared and more organized, or potentially remove the risk, so that could be moving out of a market or going under a threshold, for example. There are different ways that risk can be approached. But for us at Seismic, we love turning risk into opportunity and impact. And so the call to action that we have for you is really at that 5Ts, is move towards taking the opportunity. And how do you think about utilizing the risk model to confirm, yes, we have compliance risk, yes, we have commercial risk, but yes, we have commercial opportunity, and we also have the opportunity to turn that into environmental, social, and governance impact. One of the ways that we consider to kind of move beyond compliance is to really identify those activities that can support moving from compliance into impact. So you have a law change, you have something that happens, you know that you need to comply with it. Let's talk about the big elephant in the room, which is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, the CSRD. So most companies around the EU and beyond are preparing for the impacts around increased sustainability reporting and disclosure and data to provide better investment decisions and clarity. What does this mean, though, in principle? How do you turn that compliance effort into impact? The first one is that we talk about moving beyond compliance and supporting strategic decision making and value creation. This is a real opportunity to enhance your reputation and also increase innovation and efficiency. The first area to consider is how to deepen your stakeholder relationships through the process. So you have your horizon scan, you know the CSRD is coming up. What are the next steps to really turn the challenge of this new legislation into an opportunity? We'd always say talking to each other and learning from each other is a fantastic way to start. You can identify how to potentially turn difficult new requirements into an opportunity and impact where both parties prosper, rather than imposing requirements on your stakeholders, particularly your supply chain. And what we know for the next decade plus is that supply chain is going to be an absolute focus of transformation and change because of a lot of the legislation that's coming out, both the CSRD and also the CSDDD, which is the due diligence directive, which will really look to shine a light on the transparency of supply chains and human rights, especially. One of the other areas that I talked about as well is around, how can you find new revenue streams? And one of the things that's really a great opportunity to support with improved environmental and social impact is adopting and adapting products and services. And this is a really fascinating way that unleashes the innovation power of your teams to meet the needs of the new legislation and go beyond that to identify, are there more circular opportunities? Is there something that we can be doing around waste? How can we work with different partners potentially to enable cost reductions potentially, but also identify new revenue streams that will support you commercially. And that for me is where I really get my innovation juices going, because there is a lot of creative thinking and opportunity out this space, especially if you have good time ahead. You can really put your teams together and really unleash all the potential that they have. For many businesses, and particularly when we start talking about risk and compliance, it's about avoiding mistakes or costs. And I think it's really important to say, yes, it's important to address. Ensuring that those supply chains and operating models that we talked about that are going to change are restructured in line with legislation takes time. And so, to meet environmental and human rights obligations, it's important to do it right as much as possible first time without disrupting supply. And so being prepared, having the information in advance and having the considerations of different options can really enable you to avoid potentially costly mistakes and fixing those in the long run. And always, because we're seismic and we love to celebrate positive improvements and impact, I think having that clear understanding of your climate and societal risks, especially through a materiality lens, so taking the horizon scan and then building it together with materiality of what's important to your business, really helps you to consider what's important to the business so you can track and monitor performance in these sector and business specific areas year on year and celebrate progress authentically. Turn that into an external facing impact report and be able to communicate that authentically to your different stakeholders. So I mentioned materiality, and we mentioned also about strategy at the beginning and about how horizon scanning is a really great strategic tool to support you. And more than that, actually, materiality is a critical legal requirement of the CSRD, and it will be incorporated into more of the ISSB requirements as well. But it's a really good place to pause and consider how the materiality assessments, when it's combined with your horizon scan, is a powerful tool to both guide your own business and organization in direction and activity of where you should be facing, but also multiply performance and impact. So many of you will be familiar with materiality. Here you can see just a couple of statements here which explain what is materiality and how does it guide the business. I think what's most important is that you understand what's most significant to the business, you understand the risks and the opportunities, and you can tie that into the legal implications as well, that then support you with the right decision making to identify your strategy and the resources that you need to be able to deliver on that strategy. And all of the process in itself, both the horizon scan when combined with materiality, helps you to really bring your stakeholders on the journey of what's important from an ESG lens to your business to enable them to be able to contribute, commit, and also to encourage improved performance of the business. More than that, we see that the opportunity for value creation in the long run is being recognized externally by a much broader sense of the business. Value creation is now listed, according to a most recent survey by Morgan Stanley, as the top reason that companies are pursuing their sustainability strategy. 85% of companies see sustainability strategy as a value creation opportunity. So if you are ahead of the curve, you understand the legal requirements and opportunities around different ESG legislation, if you build that into your materiality and you build that into your strategy, value creation opportunities are available and they can be multiplied and the impact can provide commercial advantage to your business. So leaving on 85%, that's a fantastic figure. We have gone through what is a horizon scan, we've gone through the benefits, we've gone through the information around turning that risk into impact and being able to communicate that authentically. How do you get started? What are the key steps to really enable you to move forward and deliver a horizon scan in your business? So for those 30% that have never heard about it, what do we recommend? Let me give you a little story about a client of ours who came to us having recently moved into the world of sustainability, and that's still very common that we find leaders who are in board positions, exec team positions, who have been doing fantastically in their world of marketing, for example, and now they have also been asked if they can take the leadership of sustainability within their business too. And they came to us with a challenge because they had sustainability knowledge, but it wasn't expert knowledge. And they were really struggling to understand, where do I start? I work in 6 different markets. I've got 2 new acquisitions happening. I've got lots of different changes and activities ongoing in the business. I've got my own priorities in marketing, but how do I move forward with that? And very much kind of some of the feedback from different members of the organization, including CEO, was, well, surely you can just Google that information. Surely you can use Google and you can find all the ESG laws and regulations and requirements that are coming out of these 6+2 markets, and you can tell me what you need to do. And I wish it was that simple, but it really isn't. The legislation is moving so fast, the detail is very rich and it's very specific, and the language is quite confusing. And we spend a lot of time dissecting, going through that information to really understand, what does this mean to our clients? What does this mean just in general? And how do you apply that pragmatically so that you're not overdoing things and you're doing things just the right level to ensure that you've got risk management, but also you've got that opportunity for impact as well. And so we do really recommend that before saying, I'm going to do this horizon scan, that you hold internal conversations. It's really important that people build understanding of this landscape, of the challenges that are happening out there, to move on and to be able to understand, like, how do we move forward with this? So we recommend that you understand the stakeholder priorities that are ongoing in your business, and then you look at data and evidence to start to build that case for the horizon scan. It's important that your horizon scan is tailored to industry and company context. So make sure that you consider why that's so important to your business. And then it always works, doesn't it? But emphasize the mitigation to risk or potentially fines and company reputation as the first lever before moving into the opportunity for revenue growth and opportunities. And then what's really critical as well is to connect the dots between reporting and strategy to ensure that it's not seen as a one-off activity, but it's a really purposeful activity for your organization. I think it's really clear that the business case is quite critical to start with, but as well as doing that, there's a side activity around understanding the scope of your business, evaluating your market position, identifying your business model and value chain, and considering the scale of the company are all critical factors to be able to really understand what's material to you as a business, what different legislation and regulatory changes happen. So the more that you can do to prepare for this by getting ready with this different type of threshold data can really support you when you move into the horizon scanning stage. We also recommend mapping current governance process. And again, depending on the maturity of your business, you may find that there is a very strong risk management process. You may already have a very strong governance process around ESG, and this could be very easily slotted into your current activities and processes. Otherwise, it could be an opportunity to stand something up and to make sure that leadership and accountability is well confirmed, that you've got the opportunity to gather the information and complete analysis, and that you can move all the way through into embedding into reporting. We often get questions around who should be involved in part of the horizon scan. Who should be getting engaged in horizon scanning? I suppose there's always a depends answer as well, but generally we recommend a core team, an ESG or sustainability lead. We always recommend bringing in anybody in the business that is currently managing risk, and also the opportunity to engage legal, of course, and then those that might be communicating as part of it as well. So marketing in this particular case and communications. You may have a strategic lead as well, and you want to be bringing them on board. If you are a very product-led organization, a very heavy supply chain organization as well, you may want to be bringing in these additional participants. And if you're a very heavy professional services, people organization, human resources can be a very important person on the core team as well. Increasingly, finance is a very important member as an additional participant too. So with the incorporation of sustainability reporting into financial reports, there is a very clear need to tie together what may have been two kind of relatively disparate groups and bring them together to combine the purpose and the impact and the detail and the data to make sure that you comply with the different legal regulations that are there. And finally, one of the things that I always recommend when considering horizon scanning is, what's your organizational culture like? Are you an organization who will talk out loud and will challenge the different areas that come out of a horizon scan? Or are you an organization that will take things away and will look at these individually as different functions and then come back together with recommendations? I've put an example here of radical candor, which is by an author called Kim Scott, and it's something that Seismic we really adhere to in terms of our organizational health. And for us, it's always around caring personally for the organization, but also the business and the people, and being able to challenge directly, is this worth it? Is this a risk? Is this an opportunity? And doing it with all of the best intent. So really thinking about your business, how do things get done? Where do things get done? And considering how to embed that effectively, considering that organizational culture. So thank you so much for listening to our expertise and experience, our work with our different clients on horizon scanning. We would love to share with you some of the benefits here, just to summarize before we move into the next session around the corporate practitioner panel. So the final things to consider: definitely horizon scanning will bring you increased confidence and leave you better informed. It will align your stakeholders and give you access to resources. And finally, which is what we're all seeking, improved opportunity for environmental and social impact. And with that, I will hand over to Andy, who is now going to be talking to our fantastic speakers and guests around their specific learnings on sustainability reporting and horizon scanning.
Thank you so much, Ro, for that comprehensive overview and really useful and practical insights as well. I am now delighted to be introducing our guest speaker panelists today. We are all very lucky to be joined by two wonderful sustainability leaders and practitioners. We have Mark Brown from Motability Operations and Eleanor Fraser-Smith from Victory Hill Capital Partners. Welcome, Mark and Eleanor, and thank you for joining us today. Just a little bit more brief introduction to these two individuals. Mark is head of impact and sustainability at Motability Operations. Motability Operations is a purpose-driven business that helps over 700,000 individuals across the UK access mobility solutions via the Motability scheme. Mark's been with the business for over 12 years now and responsible for leading the business's approach to impact and sustainability. And Eleanor is head of sustainability at Victory Hill Capital Partners, who are a specialist investment firm directing private equity and infrastructure equity investments into sustainable energy around the globe. Eleanor is head of sustainability there and brings over 20 years of experience in sustainability to us today. Welcome, both of you, and thank you very much for being with us today to share your time, your very valuable time and very valuable experience. I thought I'd start out with a couple of questions for both of you, Mark and Eleanor. Maybe you could just share with us within your respective businesses where accountability for sustainability, ESG, reporting and disclosure sits, and maybe a quick overview of which of the frameworks, whether it's a mandatory requirement or a voluntary framework that you are choosing to report and disclose against that you're currently engaging with. Who'd like to go first?
I'm happy to start. Yeah, thanks, Andy, and thanks for having me. So, as you said, Victory Hill is a specialist investment firm focused on the energy transition. We're a small firm. There's 16 people here based in London. So we're one of the smaller organisations that Ro mentioned in her presentation. So we manage a listed fund on the London Stock Exchange. And it's worth noting that we have sustainability as an objective, which means that we probably have additional reporting requirements because of that. And also the ESG risk and opportunity management is very much integrated into our business. So in terms of where does accountability sit, our governance structure is such that ultimate accountability and approval for external disclosure sits with our sustainability committee. I'm a member of that, and that consists of the firm's managing partners. So it's the highest level of the organisation that's signing off on what we put out publicly. In my role as head of sustainability, I work across the investment lifecycle. So I work with our investment teams, our asset management teams, our investor relations, finance. But ultimately, in a 16-person team, I'm the one who is supporting our assets, driving their environmental, social performance, gathering the data and compiling those external reports. We do have some external balances and checks. We do have a limited assurance engagement on some of our ESG metrics and legal review when needed. So in terms of what we report under, as a listed fund on the London Stock Exchange, we're regulated under UK law and the Companies Act, so the non-financial reporting directive. A lot of data goes into the fund's annual report and carbon reporting. So we draw upon frameworks like the GRI, SASB in the US, and ISSB for working out what metrics to report under. We also market in the EU, so and because we have a sustainability objective, we also have to report under the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation in the EU taxonomy, which is part of that European approach. It's all part of that package of European Sustainable Reporting Standards and CSRD. And then this year, the UK has come up with a fund labelling regulation, the Sustainable Disclosure Regulation. So we're going to have to report under that next year. So that's coming out. Because of our size, we don't necessarily meet the threshold for some of these regulatory disclosures. So we report voluntarily under things like the TCFD. And we also report under the UN Principles of Responsible Investment. And because we're supporters of the Sustainable Development Goals, we also report under the UN Global Compact. So we have a lot of reporting that we do. But for us, transparency is a core value. So it's something that we embrace and we try to make the most of. I'll stop there and let Mark finish. I know that's a long list.
That's great. Thanks, Eleanor. Morning, everyone. So from Motability operations perspective, accountability sits with the Chief Finance Officer, who has overall executive responsibility. So my role reports into the CFO. Similar to Eleanor, we've got an Impact and Sustainability Committee, of which the CFO chairs, which ultimately is the governance route that oversees and manages our reporting. The other thing I would say, as a business, we are currently on a journey to be towards becoming a B Corp, which means we have changed our articles of association and the legal premise of the business. So, built into those articles of association now is the director's responsibility for sustainability and environment or management of environmental impact. We are in a slightly unique position in that we are UK centric and not listed. So therefore, there isn't a huge amount of mandatory reporting that applies to us. The mandatory reporting that does apply is TCFD and the streamlined energy and carbon reporting, where we have to disclose our scope 1 and 2 carbon footprint. However, what we do is we look wider and we look at the best practice. And for me, the reporting is about how do you tell the story, how do you tell the journey, how do you sort of bring to life your progress and performance. So we are currently using things like the GRI framework, and we're also choosing to disclose our full carbon footprint across scopes 1, 2, and 3. And for us, it's about making sure that we've got good alignment to best practice rather than just thinking solely in terms of what do we have to comply with.
Great, Mark and Eleanor. Thank you for that. I've been on a couple of CSRD related client calls with Ro and the team recently, and I feel like I still feel a need, like I have to apologize for the alphabet soup of all these acronyms, but I just don't think there's any way around it, is there? There's just so many of them, and that we kind of all have to, I guess it's a bit of a learning journey to understand, get our heads around what they all are. Thank you for that introduction and how things are being managed within your organizations. Just curious, I mean, you've kind of touched upon it, but are there frameworks that you're not currently complying with, or you may not have to comply with, but you're seeing the value in them, and maybe just speaking a little bit into what those frameworks are? And I think you mentioned one of them, Eleanor, TCFD. I think if I'm maybe newer to this space or helping my organization get my head around all of the things we have to manage from a reporting and disclosure, you mentioned TCFD is one that you don't have to comply with, but you are choosing to. What are some of those ones that are maybe on the horizon, sorry for the pun, or on your radar, that even though it's not going to be a hard requirement, you see value in, and what is that value?
Yeah, I think we report under TCFD, and similarly to TCFD, there's a new framework that's been published recently that's a voluntary one, which is TNFD, which is a task force on nature-related financial disclosures. And I think this is going to be a very important one, because I think there's growing recognition that you can't solve for climate change just by focusing on emissions. There's so many interdependencies and interconnectedness, particularly with nature. Now, it's set up very similarly to TCFD. It's got the 4 reporting pillars. What's different is that nature has a lot more metrics that you have to get your head around, and interdependencies. So I think it's one that I see very important in terms of our sustainability progress and where we're going to go next. I think it's going to take a little bit more sort of expertise in trying to get our head around it, but I think that's a key one that I would flag that we're focusing on going forward.
Thanks, Eleanor. Mark?
Yeah, very much along similar lines. I think, I totally agree with Eleanor's point. I think there is very much an emphasis for businesses to look wider than just climate. So TNFD seems to be following the same path as TCFD, in that it starts off as being a mandatory framework and then becomes a compulsory framework. But for us, certainly that nature and biodiversity disclosure piece is something that we're looking to try and build out through expanding our TCFD to include the nature and biodiversity impacts. And the aspiration is to do that within this financial year. The other thing I would say is, whilst the CSRD doesn't really apply to us, we feel that the GRI offers a similar level of coverage. And again, things like the sustainability disclosure standards, which are coming towards the back end of this year, stroke early next year. Again, it's worth looking at these frameworks in terms of understanding the intent and what they're trying to achieve, because then that gives you a good indication really of what that sort of regulator and stakeholder demands are looking at for the future, in order to help you portray and position your business in a way that actually means and resonates. Because ultimately all these frameworks are trying to do is create some consistency when you're looking and comparing performance across business A, business B, business C. So it's really thinking about the story that you want to try and tell. So we will be looking at some of these frameworks again, even though they're not compulsory for us, because actually it's trying to understand what's the essence of what these frameworks are trying to drive at.
Great, thank you both. Yeah, sounds like TNFD is squarely on both of your organizations and good for others to pick up on. And GRI, you've both identified as a useful framework to make sure you've got a good spread across a number of these stakeholder expectations. Thank you. Mark, just, we know from our work together that you took over the impact and sustainability function at Motability Operations a couple of years ago. I think, Ro mentioned a number of times, I jotted it down, a sense of calm that this proactive approach to reporting disclosure brings. Maybe thinking back to your early days of taking over this remit within the business, how did you feel about all of these requirements the business was facing?
Yeah, I was thinking about this last week actually. So the first ever slide that I wrote in relation to ESG and reporting was a picture of alphabet spaghetti, because when you first face into this stuff, and even now, the amount of acronyms that are talked about in this space. I mean, Ro mentioned earlier about frameworks doubling in the last 5 years. I mean, it feels to me like they've doubled in the last 2 years, let alone 5 years. And there always seems to be something new sort of on the horizon coming down the track. And I think whilst I truly believe that regulators are doing their best to try and streamline their approaches, what it feels like is they're actually creating more complexity and more challenges for business. But ultimately, they're trying to get to a point where you can compare apples with apples by looking at particular reporting that each company is producing to try and create some consistency. I mean, it feels like the environment at the moment is becoming more complex, but I think, I do believe over time things will start to simplify eventually. And if you think of it in terms of, it's similar to what sort of the evolution around financial reporting and creating sort of the reporting standards. We'll probably end up in that space at some point, but it still feels like quite a way away. So I think that sort of constant monitoring. I came into this role from risk management as well, and in the risk management team we had a monthly horizon scanning process, which still goes on today. And I think it's really, really valuable in terms of just keeping your eye on what is coming down the track and using that to understand how should that shape your plans and approach.
Great, thank you, Mark. Yeah, feels like we're maybe on the cusp of the age of consolidation, but not quite there yet, and we'll probably get a little messier before it gets simpler. Thank you for that. The monthly horizon scan and risk is a good example from another part of the business to take from. Eleanor, it's been touched upon a few times here, I think, this morning. There's just kind of a never-ending sea of changes around new reporting requirements, trying to keep up with those. As you said, you're kind of within your organization. There's a lot of people contributing, but it sits with you to keep abreast of all these things. How are you determining what's important for you and what to focus your finite time and energy on next?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I started doing this 20 years ago, it was about trying to identify the environmental and social risks, the important priorities and opportunities for the business. Now I interview interns and I say, oh, what career do you want to have in sustainability? And they say, oh, I want to do reporting and disclosure. And I think, oh gosh, this is how it's evolved. But yeah, we have to remember reporting's the tool and not the objective. And we still have to focus on what we're trying to achieve when we do this. And now that we're more sort of compliance driven. And we're still trying to identify and prioritize. And one thing that all these different frameworks have in common is this: they make use of this materiality analysis. And I think this is completely core to your approach, because you have to drill down on the priorities. You have to understand your impacts, your potential risks, and map that across your value chain. And then the other thing that these frameworks have got in common are the metrics that you report on. So as much as we say, oh gosh, there's so many and it's so complex, the metrics tend to be the same and transferable across these frameworks. So I think if you're doing a materiality analysis, if you're understanding your value chain, then you can prioritize and you can focus on what's important to your business amongst all these different frameworks.
Great, good advice, Eleanor. I think it's something we commonly hear, that that materiality, that exercise of understanding your stakeholders' view on what's important for you to focus on, just really helps with the prioritization and sequencing of things, for sure. I'm conscious of time. Probably just got time for one or two more questions here. Maybe for both of you, what benefits have you seen? It sounds like you've both kind of, over time, been able to take your organization on a journey of taking a more proactive, structured approach to knowing what are your requirements, expectations now and in the future. And just curious if you could share kind of what benefits you've seen from taking that more proactive approach.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, I think taking a holistic view has really helped. So when you look at all of these different frameworks, there's a large amount of overlap across them. So deciding, which of the appropriate frameworks work for you and your business, I think is probably quite key. And actually, can then help sort of provide you with some guidance around what comprehensive coverage looks like. So, one of the examples is we have a sustainably linked loan within the business, which is related to sustainability KPIs. And if we achieve those KPIs, essentially there is a commercial benefit that we can yield off the back of that through interest rate savings. So there are tangible business benefits to having the reporting in place. But more importantly, it's about putting in place the reporting that helps you assess your journey and manage your performance, and then make decisions off the back of that to understand exactly what you want to do going forward. And I'd very much say that collaboration is a great thing. Don't suffer in silence. We're all pretty much in this sort of same situations, just at different stages of the journey. And from our perspective, engaging with the likes of Seismic, I'm not on commission, honestly, but essentially what that has done is helped us accelerate our understanding and actually delve into a lot more depth than we would have been able to do on our own. And essentially what that then does is help really do shape your future activity areas of focus priority, because we're all limited on time, resource, etc. But essentially, I think having that external lens really sort of helps drive out what are the key things that you and the business want to focus on. And I don't think we would have accelerated our journey as much as we have over the last 12 months had it not been for that sort of collaboration and that deep dive into what does this stuff mean, how much of it is relevant for us, and actually what's the areas that we want to focus on.
Great, thanks, Mark. And you, Eleanor?
So benefits of reporting. I think the more formalized approach, the more of these regulations we've seen, it's no doubt helped formalize our approach and identify what's important to our business and our stakeholders. It's definitely helped us identify risks to our portfolio and enable those conversations and engagements, particularly with our operating partners who manage our assets. So they've had more adaptive management in terms of their issues in various different geographies and sectors, as well as conversations with other stakeholders. It's also been a differentiator for us because, you know, transparency for us is a core value. We're doing a lot of this stuff voluntarily, and we have had feedback from our investors that it has differentiated us from our peers. So it's useful to be able to do that benchmarking with your peers, and so no doubt it's helped us with our access to capital as well. So, you know, there's definitely value to be had from disclosure.
Yeah, great. Thank you both. I am conscious we're at time. Love those benefits. I think it's what Ro pointed to. You know, if done the right way, it's a lot more that a business gets out of it beyond compliance, its impact and business objectives and opportunities, which you two reinforce. So thank you very much. Really appreciate you both being here and sharing your experience with our community today, and to everyone for joining. We will be putting up soon our next virtual breakfast briefing for July. You can scan on the QR code here and get an update on LinkedIn when it comes across. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Wishing you a great day.